The sign outside the motel said vacancy, but the parking lot was full. That should have been my first warning. The second was the front desk clerk smiling when I asked how long people usually stayed. "As long as they need," she said. Then she slid the register closed and added, "or until they stop asking to leave." That was the moment I realized something was wrong. Because the doors were unlocked, the rooms were clean, and yet no one here had ever checked out. I wasn't supposed to be there. The motel didn't exist on my route. It wasn't on the map app, and it didn't appear on any booking site when I searched earlier that night. I was driving through a stretch of highway that felt longer than it should have, trees pressing in on both sides, radio losing signal mile by mile. January does that to roads. It stretches them, makes exits feel farther apart. The fuel gauge dipped lower than I liked, and the cold outside sharpened enough to make the steering wheel bite into my palms. When the motel lights appeared ahead, warm and steady against the dark, I felt relief before I felt suspicion. The building looked ordinary. 2 stories, exterior hallways, doors facing the parking lot, ice machines humming softly, curtains drawn in most windows, glowing faint yellow behind cheap fabric. Nothing screamed danger. That's what made it worse. I pulled into a spot near the office. The car beside mine was coated in road grime so thick it looked like it hadn't moved in weeks. Another had frost inside the windshield, frozen from the inside out. I told myself it didn't matter. I just needed sleep. The lobby bell rang when I stepped inside, the sound too loud in the empty space. The woman behind the desk looked up slowly, like she'd been waiting for that exact moment. She was older than I expected, gray hair pulled tight, uniform pressed too neatly. Her smile came late, like it had to remember how. "One night?" she asked before I spoke. "Yes," I said. She nodded, already reaching for a key. Not a card, a real key. Heavy, attached to a plastic tag worn smooth by years of handling. "No credit card needed," she added. That should have stopped me. Instead, I took the key. As she slid the register open, I glanced inside. Names filled the page, dates written carefully in ink, check-in times, room numbers. There was a column where check-out times should have been. It was empty. "Do people stay long here?" I asked casually. Her pen paused for half a second. "Most do," she said. "And when they leave?" She met my eyes then. "They don't," she replied. I laughed, because that's what you do when something sounds like a joke and your brain isn't ready to understand it yet. She didn't laugh back. Room 217 was at the far end of the second floor. As I walked up the stairs, I noticed how quiet the place was. No TVs, no voices, no doors opening or closing, but the lights were on in almost every room. As I passed them, I felt it, that sense you get when someone is standing just behind you, close enough to feel their presence, but not close enough to touch. The curtains twitched once, then went still. Inside my room, everything was normal, too normal. The bed was made perfectly, the bathroom spotless, the air warm, the heater humming with a steady rhythm that sounded almost like breathing. I locked the door out of habit. The lock turned easily, too easily. When I set the key on the nightstand, it didn't make a sound. That's when I noticed something carved into the wood beneath it. 4 words, scratched deep enough to last. Nobody checks out. I slept anyway, because at that point, I still believed leaving was a choice.
I woke up at 2:17 a.m. No nightmare, no sound, just that sudden unnatural awareness that something had changed. The heater was still running, but the room felt colder. Not winter cold, vacant cold. The kind that makes a space feel unoccupied even when you're standing in it. I sat up slowly. The parking lot light outside my window was on. Its yellow glow spilled across the asphalt, illuminating rows of cars parked too neatly to belong to tired travelers. None of them had moved. Snow dusted their roofs lightly, undisturbed. No fresh tire marks, no footprints leading away. I checked my phone. No signal, no service, no emergency bar, just the time, 2:17 a.m. That was when I heard it. A door opening. Not mine. Somewhere along the walkway outside, a door creaked open, hinges complaining softly. I waited for footsteps, for voices, for anything that sounded alive. Nothing followed. Then another door opened, closer this time. I slid out of bed quietly and crossed the room, peering through the thin gap in the curtain. A man stood outside room 214. He was barefoot. Snow covered the concrete, but he didn't react to it. He just stood there in pajama pants and a thin t-shirt, staring straight ahead at nothing. His door hung open behind him. The light room was on. I watched him for a full minute. He didn't blink, didn't shiver, didn't breathe. Then, slowly, with the same careful movement someone might use to avoid waking a sleeping child, he stepped back into the room. The door closed. I didn't sleep after that. Morning came without announcement, no sunrise glow, just a gradual lightening of the gray sky that made the motel look even more tired than it had the night before. I went outside around 8. Every room was still occupied, every curtain drawn. I walked the length of the second floor, counting doors, all closed. I knocked on one, room 214, the same room I'd seen open in the night. My knuckles barely touched the wood before I felt it. Resistance. Not physical, not like a lock, more like the door didn't want to be acknowledged. I knocked again. Nothing. "Hello?" I called softly. "Are you okay?" From inside, I heard movement, a chair scraping lightly across the floor. Then, silence. I tried another door. Same result. Another. Same. It wasn't that people weren't answering, it was that they weren't allowed to. I went back to the office. The clerk was already there, standing behind the desk, hands folded neatly in front of her. The register was open again, the book waiting. "You slept," she said. "Yes," I replied. "I want to check out." She smiled. "Checkout is in the morning," she said. "It is morning." Her smile didn't change. "Checkout happens when your stay is complete." I felt a tightness in my chest. I just needed one night. "So did they," she said, nodding toward the book. I leaned forward and looked more closely this time. The names weren't random. They were grouped, families together, couples sharing adjacent rooms, single travelers spaced evenly apart. Dates stretched back years, decades. Some entries were so old the ink had faded into the paper, but the handwriting remained careful, consistent. And next to every name, the same note appeared under status, "Still here." "What happens if someone leaves?" I asked. She closed the register gently. "They stop being guests," she replied. "That doesn't answer my question." She met my eyes. "It does," she said. "You just don't like the answer." I went back to my room and packed. That part still felt normal, familiar motions, folding clothes, zipping bags, reclaiming a sense of control. I unlocked the door. It opened. The walkway was empty. I stepped outside. The moment my foot crossed the threshold, the air changed. The motel didn't resist me, it didn't block me, it ignored me. Sound dulled. The parking lot stretched farther than it should have. The exit sign at the far end flickered weakly, like it was being seen through water. I walked faster, then ran. The exit didn't get closer. Behind me, a door opened, then another. Bare feet stepped onto concrete, not running, not chasing, just following. I stopped. The moment I turned around, the world snapped back into place. The exit was suddenly right where it should have been, and the walkway was empty again. I stood there, breathing hard, heart hammering, understanding something for the first time. You don't leave this motel by walking away. You leave it by being released. And nothing here had any reason to let me go. I learned the first rule by accident. It wasn't written anywhere, not on the walls, not on the back of the door, not even carved into the furniture like the warning on my nightstand. You only learn it by watching what happens to someone who breaks it. The man from room 214 didn't come out that morning. By noon, his curtain was still drawn, his light was still on. His car remained parked exactly where it had been the night before, frost beginning to creep along the inside of the windows again. I went back to the office. The clerk looked up the moment I stepped inside. "You shouldn't knock on doors," she said calmly. "I didn't see a sign," I replied. "There isn't one," she said. "Guests are expected to learn." "Learn what?" She reached under the desk and pulled out a small laminated card. Not a flyer, not a brochure. Something old and reused, the corners worn soft. She slid it across the counter toward me. There was only one line printed on it. "Do not wake other guests." "That's it?" I asked. "That's the first rule," she replied. "What happens if you break it?" She glanced toward the hallway that led to the rooms. "They wake up wrong." I didn't ask her to explain. I didn't need to. That afternoon, around 3, I heard shouting. Not panic, not screaming. Anger. It came from the second floor. A man's voice, hoarse and exhausted, yelling words that had been worn thin their repetition. "Let me out," over and over. I followed the sound, staying close to the wall, heart pounding harder with each step. Room 214's door was open. The man stood in the doorway, fully dressed now, shoes on his feet, bag slung over his shoulder like he was ready to leave. His face was flushed, eyes bloodshot, veins standing out along his neck. He was yelling at no one. "I didn't agree to this," he shouted. "I want to leave. I checked in, I can check out." The hallway felt heavier around him, like the air itself was listening. "You don't get to decide that," a voice said behind me. The clerk stood at the far end of the walkway. She hadn't come up the stairs, she was just there. "You woke them," she continued. "Now they know you want to go." "Good," the man snapped. "Let them stop me." The doors around him began to open, not all at once, one by one, just a few inches at first. I saw faces in the gaps, men, women, a child in one room clutching a stuffed animal that looked decades old. Their eyes were open, too open. They weren't looking at the man, they were looking through him. The man backed up, suddenly unsure. "No," he said quietly. "No, no, no." The clerk didn't move. "This is why we ask guests not to wake each other," she said. The man turned and ran. He made it 3 steps, then the hallway shortened. Not physically, not in a way I could describe later. It just refused him distance. Hands reached out from the doorways, not grabbing, guiding, correcting. He screamed then, not from pain, from understanding. They didn't pull him inside any one room. They spread him out. His bag hit the floor first, then his shoes, then his voice faded into something lower, flatter, quieter. When the doors closed, the hallway was empty again. Room 214 was gone, not locked, gone. Where the door had been was just wall, painted, seamless, like it had never existed. The clerk turned to me. "You see now," she said. "Checkout isn't a desk service." I couldn't breathe. "Where did he go?" I asked. She tilted her head slightly. "He's still here," she replied. "He just doesn't need a room anymore." That night, I sat on my bed fully dressed, didn't turn off the light, didn't lie down. At exactly 2:17 a.m., the heater paused, and from the walls, from the floor, from the space behind the mirror, I heard it. Breathing. Not one person, many. Slow, even, patient, waiting for me to make noise, waiting for me to wake them. I didn't sleep because I finally understood the second rule. You don't escape this place by fighting it. You survive it by staying quiet long enough to forget why you wanted to leave.
The second rule wasn't given to me. I overheard it. It was late afternoon, the kind of hour where the light outside turns flat and colorless, like the world is holding its breath. I was sitting on the edge of my bed, shoes still on, afraid to fully commit to being comfortable. That's when I heard voices through the wall, low, muted, close. Two people speaking from the next room over. At first, I thought I was imagining it. No one talked here. No TVs, no phones, no arguments, no laughter. Silence was part of the stay. But these voices were real. "How long have you been here?" a woman asked. A pause. "Since before the sign was new," a man replied. I leaned closer to the wall, heart pounding. "What year is it?" she asked. Another pause, longer this time. "I don't know," he said carefully. "They stopped asking." The sound faded after that, swallowed by the building like it had never existed. That was when the clerk knocked on my door. I froze. She didn't knock loudly, just once, polite, controlled. I opened it slowly. She stood there holding a small tray with a paper cup and a wrapped plastic fork. "Dinner," she said. "You haven't eaten." I hadn't noticed. The food smelled warm, normal, familiar. That scared me more than if it had smelled wrong. As she handed it to me, I saw something tucked under her arm, another laminated card. She hesitated, then slid it toward me like she'd done with the first. I looked down. "Do not ask how long you've been here." "That's the second rule," she said. "Most guests break it." "Why?" I asked. "Because time works differently here," she replied, "and noticing it makes you visible." I stared at her. Visible to who? She didn't answer. Instead, she looked past me into the room, eyes lingering on my packed bag, my shoes by the bed, the light still on. "You're still counting days," she said quietly. "That's good." "For what?" I asked. "For remembering where you came from." Then she turned and walked away, her footsteps soft, perfectly spaced, never echoing. That night, I tested something. I scratched a mark into the back of my phone case with my key. One line, a day. The next morning, it was gone. The scratch wasn't smoothed over. The plastic wasn't replaced. The mark was just missing. I tried again on the desk. Gone. On the wall. Gone. The motel wasn't erasing time. It was preventing it from being measured. I started watching the other guests more closely. They didn't age, not the way people should. A woman I saw on my second day was still wearing the same sweater a week later. Not dirty, not worn, just unchanged. A child I spotted briefly near the ice machine was still the same height every time I saw him. Same shoes, same tired stare.
Their faces weren't blank, they were worn thin, like people who'd been awake too long without realizing it. I finally asked the clerk the question I'd been avoiding. What happens if someone forgets how long they've been here? She looked at me for a long moment. They stop being guests, she said. And then? She smiled, but this time it didn't reach her eyes. Then they become part of the motel. That night, the breathing in the walls grew louder, slower, in sync. I lay on my bed, staring at the ceiling, afraid to sleep, afraid to stay awake, afraid to count anything at all. Because I understood the second rule now. The motel doesn't trap you with locked doors. It traps you by making time meaningless. And once you stop knowing how long you've been here, you stop knowing where you're supposed to go back to.
The third rule wasn't written down. It wasn't whispered through walls or handed to me on a card. I learned it the moment I stopped pretending I was calm. It happened early in the morning or late at night. I couldn't tell anymore. The light outside my window was the same dull gray it always was, like the sky had given up on deciding. I was sitting on the edge of the bed when the thought slipped out of my mouth. I want to leave. I didn't shout it. I didn't whisper it. I just said it. The motel reacted instantly. The heater cut out. The room went quiet in a way that felt intentional. Even the distant breathing in the walls paused, as if something had turned to listen. Then the intercom crackled. Not loudly, not threateningly. "Front desk," the clerk's voice said. "Please come downstairs." My legs felt weak as I stood. I didn't want to go, but the alternative felt worse. The hallway outside my room was brighter than usual, the lights humming softly, guiding me forward. The lobby was empty when I arrived. The clerk stood behind the desk, the register open, the book waiting. "You said the words," she said calmly. "What words?" I asked, though I already knew. She tapped the page with her pen. "I want to leave." The phrase was written there now, beside my name, not under notes, under status. "What happens now?" I asked. She studied me, the way a doctor might study a patient who's asked the wrong question. "Now you're eligible," she said. "For checkout? For release." I didn't like the way she said it. She gestured toward the hallway behind her. "Someone else asked before you. You should see." She led me to the far end of the first floor, to a room I hadn't noticed before. The door was marked with no number, just a faint outline where one might have been scratched away. Inside, the room was empty. No bed, no furniture, just a chair in the center of the floor. A man sat in it. He looked younger than the others, less worn. His clothes were clean, his posture upright, eyes clear. "How long have you been here?" I asked him before I could stop myself. The clerk stiffened. The man smiled faintly. "Long enough," he said. "But I remembered." "Remembered what?" He leaned forward slightly. "That I wanted to go home." The clerk stepped between us. "He's ready," she said, "and so are you." The man stood. The moment he did, the room changed. The walls seemed to pull farther apart, the air growing thin and sharp. "Where are you taking him?" I asked. She didn't answer. Instead, she opened a door at the back of the room. Behind it was the parking lot. Daylight, real daylight, bright enough to hurt my eyes. A car waited there, engine running, exhaust visible in the cold. The man laughed softly, a sound I hadn't heard in what felt like forever. "I knew it," he said. "I knew this place couldn't keep me forever." He stepped outside.
The moment his foot crossed the threshold, he stopped. Not frozen, paused. His smile faltered. "Something's wrong," he said. The clerk's voice hardened for the first time. "Go," she said. He took another step and screamed, not from pain, from realization. His body didn't move forward, it stayed exactly where it was. But the space around him did. The parking lot stretched, the car pulled farther away, the daylight dimmed, fading back into the same gray haze as the motel. The man collapsed to his knees, sobbing. "I asked," he said. "I wanted to leave." "Yes," the clerk replied. "That's the third rule." She looked at me. "You don't get released because you want to leave," she said. "You get released when the motel no longer wants you." The door closed. The room vanished. When I found myself back in the lobby, my name had moved again in the register. No longer "still here." Now it read, "considering release." That night, the breathing in the walls returned louder than ever, closer, as if the motel was leaning in, thinking, deciding whether I was worth keeping.
I stopped thinking of the other guests as trapped. That was the mistake everyone made at first. They weren't prisoners. They were resources. I realized it when I noticed the repairs. The motel was old, that much was obvious. Paint peeled in places, railings rusted, carpets carried stains no one bothered to clean, and yet nothing ever failed. Lights never burned out, doors never jammed, the heater never broke for good. Whenever something looked close to wearing down, a guest disappeared. Not loudly, not dramatically. One day they were there. The next, a stair rail was sturdier. A crack in the pavement was gone. A room smelled less like emptiness. The motel didn't consume people all at once. It absorbed them. I saw it happen to a woman named Ellen. I only knew her name because I heard it spoken softly one night through the wall. She'd been here longer than most. Her voice sounded thin, stretched out, like it had been pulled too far over time. Ellen followed the rules. She stayed quiet. She didn't ask questions. She never spoke about leaving. She worked, too. I'd seen her helping the clerk once, folding towels behind the desk, her movements slow and practiced. At the time, I thought she was just another long-term guest earning her stay. That was before I saw what happened to her room. One morning, her door was open. Inside, the bed was gone. So was the desk, the lamp, the carpet. The room was bare concrete, still warm. The clerk stood beside me in the hallway. She was useful, she said, but she wore out. My stomach turned. What do you mean, wore out? She looked at me then, really looked at me, as if weighing how much truth I could handle. Some guests keep their shape longer than others, she said. Some forget themselves quickly. Some fight. Some remember too much. And Ellen? She remembered just enough to be steady, the clerk replied. That's a valuable trait. I backed away slowly. What happens to people like her? The clerk gestured to the walls, to the wiring, to the warmth, to the quiet. I felt sick. That's what the breathing is, I whispered. She nodded. Guests who stopped needing rooms. The motel wasn't haunted. It was staffed. That was when I understood what the clerk really was. She didn't belong to the motel. She belonged to the guests. She was what was left of someone who had learned the rules early enough to survive, long enough to be promoted. I asked her that night, "Were you a guest once?" She didn't answer immediately. When she did, her voice was different, less practiced. "Yes," she said. "And you checked out?" Her smile returned, tight, careful. "No," she replied. "I was kept." I started noticing the changes in myself after that. My voice sounded steadier when I spoke quietly. The breathing in the walls synced more easily with mine. The hallway lights brightened slightly when I walked past. The motel was learning my shape. I was becoming familiar. That night, I dreamed I was behind the desk, pen in my hand, writing names I didn't recognize but somehow knew were important. When I woke up, there was a towel folded neatly by my bed. I hadn't asked for it. The clerk stopped watching me after that. She didn't need to. The motel already was.
The offer didn't come all at once. That's important. If she'd asked me outright, I might have refused. I might have panicked. I might have tried to run again, even knowing how that ended. Instead, the motel let the idea grow inside me slowly, the way mold spreads in damp places, quiet, unnoticed. I only realized what was happening after it was already too late. It started with small responsibilities. One morning, I found a stack of clean towels outside my door. No knock, no note, just neatly folded, still warm. I didn't touch them. That afternoon, they were gone. The next day, I woke to the sound of the ice machine jammed down the walkway, a harsh grinding noise out of rhythm with the rest of the building. It bothered me more than it should have. Without thinking, I went outside and fixed it. I don't know how I knew what to do. My hands moved confidently, loosening a panel, clearing ice that shouldn't have been there. When it started working again, the noise stopped, and the motel settled. I felt something like relief. That scared me. The clerk noticed. "You're adapting," she said later, watching me from behind a desk. "I didn't agree to anything," I replied. She nodded. "No one ever does." I started seeing the replacements. When a guest disappeared, someone else took their place almost immediately. Not a new arrival from the road, someone already here, stepping into a role that fit them too well. A man who'd once sat silently on his bed for days began restocking vending machines. A woman who used to cry quietly at night now answered phones that never rang. A teenager I'd seen hiding in his room was suddenly repainting room numbers that had begun to fade. They didn't talk about it. They didn't need to. The motel wasn't asking them to become something new. It was asking them to stop resisting what they were becoming. I found my name again in the register, not under "still here," not under "considering release," under a new heading, "on duty." I confronted the clerk that night. "I'm not your employee," I said. She didn't look up from the book. "You are no longer just a guest," she replied. "I didn't agree to stay." "No," she said calmly. "You agreed to function." I felt the building respond to that word. The lights hummed, the heater adjusted, the breathing in the walls grew deeper, steadier. "You need me," I said. "Yes," she replied without hesitation, "and you need us." I wanted to deny it, but part of me understood. I wasn't being kept because I was weak. I was being kept because I was useful. That night, I dreamed I was standing at the front desk, watching the road through the glass doors. Cars passed without slowing. Headlights swept over the vacancy sign without illuminating it. No one saw the motel anymore unless it wanted to be seen. A man walked in, cold, tired, relieved. I smiled at him. When I woke up, my mouth hurt, as if I'd been smiling for hours.
Hope came back to the motel the way it always does, quietly, convincingly, too late. It started with the road. One evening, as I stood behind the front desk without remembering when I'd walked there, headlights appeared outside the glass doors. Not passing, slowing. A car turned into the parking lot, a real car.
Fresh snow broke beneath its tires. The engine idled unevenly, coughing in the cold. Steam rose from the hood. The driver stepped out and stretched like someone who had been driving too long. New. My chest tightened. The clerk didn't react. She kept writing, pen scratching softly across the register. I stepped away from the desk and walked outside. The air felt different near the road, sharper, more awake. The parking lot didn't stretch when I crossed it. The exit sign didn't flicker. The road was right there. The driver smiled at me. "Is this place open?" he asked. I nodded. "Yes," I said automatically. Then I stopped because the word felt wrong in my mouth. I looked at the man more closely. He was tired, cold, relieved. Everything I'd been when I arrived. I wanted to warn him. I opened my mouth. Nothing came out. Behind me, I felt it. Not hands, not pressure. Alignment. The motel adjusting around me, reminding me where I stood in its system. "Do you have rooms?" the man asked. "We always have vacancy," the clerk said from the doorway. I turned. She was watching me now, really watching. This was the test. If I told him to leave, the motel would mark me, not for release, for correction. I'd seen what correction looked like. Rooms erased, voices flattened, people turned into warmth and silence. If I stayed quiet, the man would check in, another resource, another replacement. Hope twisted in my chest, the idea that if I did this right, if I played my role just a little longer, maybe the motel would finally let me go. "Just one night," the man said, smiling. I heard myself answer, "Just one." That was when I understood the final cruelty of the place. It doesn't trap you by force, it traps you by making you complicit. That night, I stood in the hallway listening to the familiar breathing in the walls. It sounded fuller now, stronger, satisfied. I went back to my room and sat on the bed. The carved words beneath the nightstand were gone. In their place, something new had been scratched. "Thank you for your service." I didn't sleep. I waited, because I knew what came next. The motel doesn't decide to keep you when you try to leave. It decides to keep you when you help someone else stay.
The offer came without ceremony. No paperwork, no signatures, no deadline, just certainty. It was morning again, or night. The light outside hadn't changed in what felt like days. I stood behind the front desk, hands resting on the counter, watching the register like it might say something new if I stared long enough. The clerk closed the book. For the first time since I arrived, she looked tired. "You're ready," she said. "For what?" I asked, though my voice already sounded like it belonged here. She stepped away from the desk. "I've been here a long time," she said. "Longer than I remember arriving, longer than I remember wanting to leave." I didn't move. She gestured toward the road outside the glass doors. "You can go," she said, "right now. No rules, no tests." I laughed quietly. "That's not how this works." She smiled, and this time it was real. "It is now." I looked at the doors. The road was visible, clear, familiar. The snow beyond it looked cold but honest. Cars passed in the distance, their headlights steady, indifferent. I could walk out. I knew that. The motel wasn't stopping me. That was the final rule. It doesn't keep you by force at the end. It keeps you by choice. "What happens if I leave?" I asked. She didn't answer immediately. Finally, she said, "Then someone else takes the desk, someone newer, someone who still believes this place is temporary." "And you?" I asked. Her eyes flicked to the walls, the ceiling, the quiet hum of the building.
I get to rest, she said. I get to stop holding it together. I understood then. She wasn't guarding the motel, she was maintaining it. And it was failing, slowly, subtly. People don't disappear from this place because it's hungry. They disappear because it needs to keep functioning, and it needs someone behind the desk who remembers what leaving feels like. I walked to the doors. My hand rested on the handle. The cold seeped through the glass, sharp and real. I could step out. I could drive until the motel wasn't in my mirrors anymore. I could tell myself it was over. But I knew what would happen. Another tired driver would pull in. Another person would accept the key. Another name would be written in the book. And without someone like me watching, counting, adjusting, the motel would start taking more, taking faster, taking worse. I stepped back. The doors didn't close behind me. They didn't need to. I turned to the desk. The clerk was already fading, not vanishing, spreading, her outline softening, thinning into the air, into the walls, into the steady warmth of the building. "Thank you," she said. The register was open. The pen felt heavy in my hand. I wrote my name on the next line, not under "still here," not under "considering release," under "front desk." The motel exhaled. That night, a car pulled into the parking lot. I straightened my posture, adjusted my voice. The bell rang. I looked up and smiled. "One night?" I asked. The man nodded, relief washing over his face. "Yes," he said. I slid the key across the counter. No credit card needed. As he walked away, I opened the register. His name appeared neatly on the page. The checkout column remained empty. Outside, the vacancy sign flickered once, then steadied. If you ever drive this road in January and you see a motel that feels too quiet, too warm, too willing, you can stop if you want. The doors will open, the room will be clean, and someone will be there to welcome you. Just don't ask how long people stay, and don't ask who works the desk, because nobody checks out. And I'm always here.